Greetings, Herculoin. Now that you've taken your mission from B to U, it's time for you to learn how to sink ships. Now the first thing you need to do is find the ship. This is where the hydrophone usually comes in handy. I recommend setting your course through a series of waypoints and then using the hydrophone sweep button that we went over in the previous lesson. Space the intervals out so that the max hydrophone range ring overlaps a little bit for the sake of efficiency. You can set your time compression to 1800 times while performing this search, and the sweep will automatically shift to 140 times while submerged and then return to 1800 on the surface if you do not find any contacts. If you do find a hydrophone contact, then the time compression will turn off and you can set an intercept course by right-clicking the contact's banner. If your target is moving away from you, it would be best to adjust your course to pass your target and then lie in wait further along their course to ambush them. It is quite difficult to torpedo a target from behind. Once you've made contact with your target, it's time to get a torpedo shooting solution. Launching a torpedo is a process with a couple of ways you can go about it. If you have clear visibility on the surface, then all the work can be done through the periscope. If the surface is foggy or too dark, then the map is going to be your best option. No matter what process you use, you must remember to have the torpedo warmed up if you want it to detonate. Using the tab key, you can set one of your engineers to perform a torpedo maintenance action. This can be sped up by assigning him some crew members to help. But be advised, this does make noise. If you're being actively hunted by escorts, this might give away your position. On the surface, your first step is to identify the ship type, class, and nation. The ship type refers to whether it's a freighter, a tanker, or a warship of some kind. Your primary goal will usually be the cargo ships, but sometimes you have to peel away some layers of escorting warships to get to them. Once you've locked onto the ship using the mouse or holding down E, you'll see what type of ship it is. Next, you must identify it by opening the identification book. This displays a silhouette of the ships that you will encounter on the seas. Each ship type has certain details that will give it away. An Empire freighter, for example, will have 2 masts and diagonal booms, but specifically the Empire Explorer variety has a 3rd mast in the middle. The Empire Tower will have 2 king posts in the stern or the back of the ship, while the Empire Bell will have neither. Destroyers can often be identified by the number and configurations of their masts and funnels, or smokestacks. The more you encounter, the more quickly you will recognize them. Once you have identified the type of ship, you will be aware of vital information, such as the length, height, and draft. Using the length, you can gauge their speed. Point your periscope ahead of the target and open up the chronometer. As the bow of the target passes the crosshair, start the chronometer. When the stern passes the crosshair, stop the chronometer and set the time. This will give you the speed of your target. Next, we need to find the estimated course of the target. There are a variety of ways to do this. Using the periscope to fire, I will go back to the map and use the protractor tool. The protractor will give you a wealth of useful information. First, you want to click directly ahead of your target. Then you want to click the middle of your target, and the mouse will snap to the center on its own. Then you will want to drag the final point next to your U-boat and click a 3rd time. This sits down 2 endpoints and a vertex. Click and drag the 3rd point back to your U-boat. Unfortunately, you cannot click directly on your U-boat when plotting the original angle. Now the number displayed in the vertex of the angle is your angle on bow. Now the easiest way to describe the angle on bow is which direction does my target need to look to wave goodbye to me. Returning to the periscope, click the course button, which matches the protractor tool icon. Then change it to angle on bow. You want to click and drag away from the course tool to allow for a more accurate input of numbers. Port, or red, and starboard, green, will be the reference from which side of the ship your target needs to wave. The easiest way to remember all of this is that port, left, and red all have fewer letters than starboard, right, and green. Once you've locked in the angle on bow, you can put the course tool away. It doesn't have to be exactly on, because your targets are pretty big. Now that we know what your target is, and how fast it's going, and where it's headed, we need to find out how far away it is. There are two ways we can do this, one of which we've already done. You can return to the map and just look at the line on the protractor tool from your target to your U-boat. That will tell you the distance. You can manually input that into the distance box in the periscope's calculator. This is how I plot all of my shots. You can also use the statometer tool. First, you must line up the horizontal line of the periscope's crosshair with the waterline of your target. Since identifying the ship class tells you the height from the waterline to the highest point, using Q and E, you can create a ghost of the ship and move it up or down so that the waterline of one touches the highest point of the other. This method is far more difficult in rough seas, dark conditions, or if you can't reliably see the top of your target, but it's impressive when it works. Now you know where your target is, where it's going, and where it will be when the torpedo strikes. Now you can call up the torpedo launch controls. The torpedoes that are red are warmed up. Mousing over them will tell you what type of torpedo they are. If you look at the identification book, you can see the draft of the target. This is how deep underwater the ship sits. The deeper you're hit, the more damage you'll do. But rough waters could cause the ship to bounce up and over the torpedo if you set the depth too deep. Once you've set the torpedo depth, click the tubes to flood them with water. Once the tubes are flooded, you can fire and wait for the kaboom. Firing from the map requires much of the same information, but you'll get it in a slightly different way. First, you'll click on the target on the map, and it opens up its information box. To find the ship's course, you take the protractor tool and draw your first dot from in front of your target and the second dot to the middle of the target. Then your third dot will go as directly north as possible. If the ship is headed in an easterly direction, you can input the degrees as you see them. If they are traveling in a westerly direction, you will input the degrees as a negative value. Next, you will want the speed of your target. This gets a bit trickier. There are some mods that will have stopwatches built into them, and we will cover that in a later video about mods. But worst case, you can always use your phone or a stopwatch in real life. Using the marker tool, you'll place a point on the map slightly ahead of your target. When the target's bow passes that point, start your stopwatch. When it reaches 3 minutes and 15 seconds, place another point at the bow of your target. Then, using the ruler tool, measure how many meters are between the 2 points. Divide this number by 100, and this is your target's estimated speed in knots. So if it is 700 meters, they're traveling at 7 knots. It's not exact, but it's close enough for a torpedo shot at a normal range of no more than 2 kilometers away. Now you want to measure the distance between your U-boat and the target, again with the ruler tool. Once you have these values set, you can open up the torpedo launch computer. Since you are not able to identify the class of the boat, you won't know its length or its draft. I highly recommend only firing a single torpedo and setting the depth to 2.5 meters or no more than 3 meters. You can always clean up later with another torpedo or the guns if needed. Then flood the tube, launch the fish, and wait for your hydrophone operator to report the explosion.
40 Sekunden bis Torpedoeinschlag. Treffer. Schwere Schäden am Rumpf.
A few important things to remember. First, if you're firing at multiple targets, shoot at the targets that are further away and/or moving away from you first, as the shot has to travel further. Be mindful of whether you're firing your faster or slower torpedoes as well. If at all possible, identify your target's flags. If they aren't in an enemy convoy, neutral ships won't count, and firing on friendly ships will cause you to be branded a traitor. Sometimes a ship needs more than one torpedo, but you can always fire again later. Don't rush your shots or waste torpedoes. U-boat captains are patient ambush predators. Don't treat your U-boat like a fighter plane. Good luck, Herculoin.
The kind of music men hum or whistle when they feel on top of the world. And gentlemen, one of the many things that give you that liftoff feeling is the pleasure of being well dressed.